Currently, there are 21 jobs in Final Fantasy XIV, and with each expansion, Square Enix adds 2 more new jobs into the table. No matter how every content creator says it, how they complain on how everything should be fixed, there's just no way you can achieve a perfect balance of capability and usage for every single job in every single patch. So in this video, we will be talking about some jobs that are favored last in this patch based on the statistics in the latest Ultimate FRU and why their pick rate is that low in this fight. But before we continue, my name is Aylaveen and I make weekly 14 videos. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing because my fish is pregnant and I need money for her C-section surgery. Number 1. Summoner. Before we start talking specifically about Summoner, we need to address the elephant in the room, which is Pictomancer. Because this issue of low pick rates is true to all other casters because currently Pictomancer is just way too strong to not be picked as your caster. Yes, with how strong Pictomancer is, double caster composition becomes viable again. And that's where we will start to discuss Summoner and why it has a much lower pick rate compared to Black Mage and Red Mage as the second caster of Picto. Because let's be honest, even though double caster composition is viable, most groups still opt for double melee composition on patch to ensure they can meet the DPS check. Now, we will take a look at the current pick rate. Standing at the bottom of the barrel, only 58 Summoner cleared the fight out of thousands of clear logs. For comparison, there are 2,547 Pictomancer clear so far. That's almost 50 times more clear rate. It's that ridiculous. But let's not talk about why and how Pictomancer is just way too broken because everyone's already talking about it. Let's instead talk about the other casters as well, who's not picked as high as Picto, but slightly better than Summoner, which is Black Mage and Red Mage. Black Mage's low clear rate of 175 is purely because of its high skill floor, and it's also the reason why it's still picked more than Summoner. There's a niche for it. Their damage currently in FRU is not that bad, placing 4th in total RDPS chart, only below Picto, Dragoon, and Monk, being the highest selfish DPS without a rate buff. Red Mage on the other hand is the more favorable compared to the two, as it deals more damage than Summoner and it's also the best recovery job in the game. Red Mage's ability to resurrect multiple people at once is invaluable, and it's probably the only reason to go double caster with Pictomancer being a must pick. But still, why is Summoner that low compared to other casters? The main issue is that it serves little to no purpose in any raid composition. In a single caster composition, it will definitely lose spot to Pictomancer or a very good Black Mage. In a double caster comp, it will definitely lose its spot to Red Mage, which is much better as caster like we discussed before. But that's not all. Their overall RDPS is extremely low, placing second to last in the DPS chart of FRU, just above Machinist. With the high amount of downtime in FRU, Summoner struggles a lot despite bringing Searing Light into the table, because most of their damage comes from the primals it summoned. With the low amount of uptime, the less those primal will be casted. The only thing that I can think of how they can fix this issue is to allow primals to be summoned without target and burst all at once. But it still should have some cooldown mechanic to avoid it being overexploited, so it won't be as much damage as full uptime. Number 2. Machinist. The next in line is actually the other casters, but we have talked about them in the previous segment. So I want to talk about the next in line, which is Machinist, the 4th lowest clear rate in FRU. So what exactly is the issue with Machinist in FRU? There's actually not much to say in my opinion, because just take a look at this graph. You can see how far apart Machinist RDPS to Picto's RDPS. One is so far away in Galaxy and the other is so deep down in Hell. The main reason for this issue in FRU is because of how Machinist reacts to downtime, because FRU has a lot of it. Machinist struggles with downtimes because of how the Automaton Queen works. They require battery gauge that only fills up with skills that requires target, such as Hit Clean Shot, Chainsaw, and Air Anchor. With downtime and no target to hit, your timing for Automaton Queen might be messed up. This situation is similar to Bard in Endwalker, where songs needs to be targeted. But now that they remove it, Bard becomes a better option in downtime situations. I feel like they really need something to fill the battery gauge that doesn't require targets, so downtimes doesn't mess their damage up too much. But then again, this issue persists even with a full uptime situation for Machinist. If you take a look at the Savage statistics where most fights are full uptime, Machinist still struggles in RDPS, even lower than Red Mage on average, which shouldn't be because Machinist is a selfish DPS with no buffs. They should be at least higher than Red Mage and slightly closer to melees. I feel like Machinist definitely needs a potency buff in the next few patch. And well, their competitor are buff classes, Bard and Dancer, which in general is just better currently because of how strong Picto is. So anything that buffs Picto and doesn't really struggle with downtimes is good right now. Number 3. Reaper. The last one that I want to talk about is the lowest pick rate from melees, which is Reaper. In the last ultimate of Endwalker, the Omega Protocol, Reaper was the strongest melee on patch. So what actually happens in FRU that made Reaper become the last option for a lot of melee players? If you take a look at the DPS statistics of Futures Rewritten, Reaper is actually not that bad. Yes, it's not at the top with Dragoon, Monk or Ninja, but it's still better than Viper and Samurai for the total RDPS. There's a few issues that I can think of that puts off people from playing Reaper this patch. First is the job's reliance on uptime to build gauge. This is quite similar to Machinist's battery gauge situation where Enshroud gauge can only be filled through uptime by filling Soul gauge and spending them to build Enshroud gauge. However, unlike Machinist, Reaper's gauge building is not as punishing as Machinist, because with battery gauge, less gauge means less DPS for Automated Queen. But Reaper only needs 50 Shroud gauge to enter any 2-minute window for a double Enshroud because now one of them needs to be the Enshroud from Plentiful Harvest to execute Perfectio. So even though this issue of struggling with downtime exists, it's not as bad as Machinist. The second aspect that I can think of is the fact that their job is just too similar to Viper. They're both the same gauge building job with a very similar burst profile if you compare Enshroud to Reawakening, with Viper being a much better option at disengagement compared to Reaper. I assume this aspect is what prompted a lot of Reaper players to play Viper instead at the beginning, since they tried it in Savage and saw how Viper outperforms other melees, which made them gear Viper during the Savage in order to use it in FRU without knowing how the fight will be. But I think after seeing how Viper performs and how Reaper is actually better RDPS wise, a lot might want it to swap into Reaper. But they don't share gears and the weekly Tomcap and Savage rewards might prevent them from doing so. But if this is indeed a reason for Reaper players, we should be seeing an increase of usage in the next few patches. All in all, I think every job is still viable for FRU, but right now with how strong Picto is with downtime, it is indeed grieving for not bringing that class into FRU. So that's about it for this video. What do you think about these classes in FRU? Should some of them actually be buffed, or do you actually prefer the other classes get nerfed? Or do you think there are other reasons that causes these jobs to lack usage? Let me know in the comment section down below and I'll see you next time. Bye.